everyone. Thank you all for coming. If you wouldn't mind just kind of coming down and getting a seat, and we will get it started. So first, just wanted to say thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's a holiday season, so lots of activities are happening, lots of parties, so I really appreciate the fact that you took time out of your schedule to come tonight and hear our lovely panelists. Just to kind of introduce myself, many of you know me. I'm Kim Peters. I actually do all the alumni relations at the School of Public Health. So I'm the one that you see all the emails from, and I hope that I don't bombard you too much, but really the goal is to engage everybody and offer programming such as this, especially doing an integrated program with the school, with the business school and with the Columbia Venture Community, which is an interest group from the CAA. So on that note, I really kind of want to kick it off and introduce you all to Bunny Ellerin, and she is going to be our moderator tonight, and she actually is the director of the healthcare program at the Columbia Business School. I will let her kind of lead and introduce all the panelists tonight. We'll have a little bit of a conversation, and then we'll open it up to the floor for Q&A. Thanks, enjoy.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm Bunny Ellerin. I run the healthcare management program at Columbia Business School. I've been there about Can you not hear me? Yes? Okay, well, we have a mic. So if you can't hear me, let me know. What?
It is turned on.
Okay.
See if that works.
Can you hear me now? Oh, great. Excellent. So I came to business school about 2 years ago after a career in the business of healthcare for 20 plus years. And one of the things that I've really wanted to do at the business school is create a collaborative environment where we are partners with the other schools in Columbia, because healthcare is a business. Whether you went to medical school or the School of Public Health or any school, we know that healthcare is a business. And so we want to partner with the other schools, collaborate, and connect. So tonight is really important for me personally, and I do want to give a big shout out to what I call the Venn diagram, one of an MPH MBA, Michael Pass, who is on the advisory board for Mailman alumni. Michael's been instrumental in connecting the schools, and so thank you, and thank you for coming. So with that, this is a really cool topic, right? Entrepreneurship, and we've got 3 phenomenal speakers, all of whom really represent a different part of the healthcare ecosystem. So I think you're going to get a very interesting perspective on, one, what area they're in, but also how they came to become, or how they came to be entrepreneurs and running their own businesses. So the way we're going to run it, we've got about an hour. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, tell them a little bit about their story, but briefly, like 3 minutes. Then I've got some questions that we are going to go over, but I really want to hear from the audience, because this is for you. And so we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. And when we get to Q&A, I want those cues, right? So prepare those questions, because we want to hear from you. So with that, our panelists are Danielle Boutin, Gadi Durrani, and Josh Krieger. And let's start. Let's hear from you first.
Okay. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Danielle Boutin, and I'm an occupational therapist. And when I earned my MPH here many years ago, it was in the Department of Geriatrics and Gerontology. And I went on to work in the field of aging for many years and was recruited while here to set up a department at Oxford Health Plans that didn't exist. It was an interesting challenge, so I set up the Wellness and Health Promotion Division for their Medicare line of business and did that for a number of years, really grew it from the ground up and loved it. And then United Healthcare acquired Oxford. And it became a very different world for me. And ultimately, I was part of a big group of New Yorkers who were downsized and did the only thing that made sense at that moment was to go to Africa. truly. And I did, and there began the next chapter of my life. And I had the good fortune of intersecting with a physician, crying our eyes out in a tent, saying there are no medical supplies here. I'm here from London. I'm here to do medical mission work, and I'm nothing but frustrated and helpless, and that was it for me. There are moments we can hear someone's story and sit with it, and there are moments where we hear someone's story and we have to do something with the story we bared witness to, and that was my moment. And so I came home knowing nothing about this non-for-profit that I was about to launch. I named it Afya in honor of the land that speaks Swahili, and it means health there, and hit the ground running. And started a non-for-profit in a body of work I literally knew nothing about, but here's what I did know. I knew how to lead. I knew how to find my way, and I think you bring those skills anywhere you go. I don't think it's the walls that define that. And so today, Afya is alive and well, and we've rescued over 9 million pounds of medical supplies and equipment from our partner hospitals all over New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we have shipped these supplies to 82 nations. And the model is predicated on people supplying us with their wish lists. No one is going to get anything that they haven't asked for, because that's just a flawed model completely. But the work is extraordinary and deeply meaningful. And it was probably the best choice I ever made to get on a plane instead of jumping into a job search.
That's fantastic. I'm already inspired. So,
hi, I'm Gati Dharani. Can you hear me? Okay. So my background is in the pharmaceutical industry. So I did my public health degree while I was working in pharma. And I was in SPARES class, like many of you probably were, learning about socioeconomic determinants of health, learning about food deserts, learning about all the things that can lead to poor health. And I saw a gap in my work, in my line of work, where we weren't really addressing that. So it really hit home. A kind of inflection point for me was I had a family member that was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and we went to the doctor, and they put him on Remicade right away. And there were no conversations about nutrition or health. So I was really surprised, and I started doing more research around UC and kind of some of the food additives that can lead to exacerbations and inflammation. So I got really interested in nutrition. So I ended up doing a certificate diploma in nutrition and started Zavi Health, which is a nutrition company that links physicians directly to a network of RDs, or registered dietitians, that can be prescribed by the doctor for their patients. So if they have a patient that might benefit from losing 5 to 10 pounds, we can put them in touch with an RD. If they have a very complicated patient that's going through chemo and has multiple comorbidities that need special care for nutrition, we can connect them to that. So we have lots of different offerings that our RDs bring, different languages as well, and we do all of the back-end billing. So that's a big issue for patients where they can't really afford to pay out of pocket for an RD. In New York City alone, I think the average cost for an hour with an RD is like $125. So what we do is we get the RDs credentialed, and we do the billing and all of the paperwork on behalf of the physician's office. So we make it really seamless and make it really easy for the doctors to make nutrition part of their patient's care. So right now we see about 20 patients a month, and we accept United, Aetna, Cigna. We just got on Medicare, Medicaid, and we take the Union $11.99 plan. So that was the biggest hurdle for us to get on insurance plans. So we're starting to do that.
fantastic.
So nice to meet you.
Hi there. Thanks for all for coming out. I think this is a very important topic of public health professionals starting businesses that have impact on the world. So I want to thank you for that. My name is Joshua Krieger from Pickett Pharmaceuticals. My background is I'm a clinical trial statistician at the School of Public Health here at Columbia. Was very fortunate to get to work with many of those at Columbia Presbyterian and by designing trials to improve patient protocols that were going through the network at the time. Through that insight and also insight into private trials that were going on, we saw a lot of sort of botched clinical endpoints that were happening, and a group of colleagues of mine got together and said, look, there has to be very good compounds out there, but the execution of the trial didn't go through for one reason or another. Like, how do you rescue those? So we started looking at, how do you identify these compounds? How do you bring them back to life? Because these are good medications where good research dollars went into. And really, especially seeing through Spare's class and others within the MHA program, that generic products, especially within a category called complex, generics the price is almost as high as the branded drug, and the FDA has, until recently, hasn't supplied information on how to bring those to market. So the idea of Pickett is to target these complex products. These are transdermal patches, ophthalmics, oncology products, where even though they're off-brand and loss of exclusivity, the price is still too high. So what we do is, and our expertise is both on the clinical trial side, but as well on the regulatory science side, to go to the FDA and show the path that's needed in order to take these complex products and have an equivalent that's beyond the standard of a new standard that doesn't exist right now. And especially within the last 8 months, Scott Gottlieb has issued a series of guidances where you can skip the clinical endpoint in trials. This is another major advancement, I think, that in a future thinking stance that the FDA is taking. So we're going after these products to give access to those around the world for an unmet need.
So already, in just a couple of minutes, you have each hit on something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't, which is there was an unmet need that each of you saw and targeted. And for those who are sort of into the digital health scene in New York, oftentimes a lot of what we see are these really cool technologies that are in search of a problem, right? And so here you each identified a problem and jumped in. How much additional research did you do? Did you put together a formal business plan? Did you do market sizing? You know, I'd love to hear from each of you how you got the unmet need and then what? And just jump in.
Yeah, I think for us, it definitely was the market. You want to know how much the product costs, what's the size of the market, and what happens, how much of the market can you have, and what happens when the price goes down. We are looking to help the world by bringing access to more products, but we still need to have margins to run the business. So, we had a business plan in place, but really we put that aside because with the experience of the company, there's many paths that we could have taken, whether that's reformulation, novel compounds, but market size was what we targeted for the first.
Did you put together a formal plan?
Yeah, I mean, basically what we did is we went to the FDA website. We got the guidances that were out there. We started talking to experts. We found those, especially with ophthalmic products, we went to those ex-executives in Alcon, talked about the products, asked them, what did they think about the products that needed to have approval, and why did these generics, why don't they have an equivalence, and sort of got the tips. That sort of took our hit list and narrowed it down, went back to the market, looked to buy the API and the supplies, and as that thing came together, the business plan refined, but I think we really looked at what's the margin and what can we do and how do you stay profitable as well as helping the public good.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to lie and say I didn't get swept up in the digital health scene in New York City. At first we were like, okay, we're a HIPAA compliant video chat platform. Okay, now we're a e-commerce site for RDs to put their profiles up, almost like a Match.com for RDs. And we did all that, and we just eventually realized that we need to take the noise out of it. And what we really are is a brokerage for RDs and physicians. So we stopped all that. We had a business plan for our HIPAA compliant, telehealth platform and scrapped that. And we worked with a lot of accelerators in the city. Like we worked with Blueprint Health, we worked with the NYC EDC Collaborative. So we worked with HitLab, which is affiliated with Columbia. So kind of working with mentors and people in the space, we realized that we're not really digital health. We're a health company that has an innovative solution for an unmet need. So that new business plan hasn't been written yet, but that's kind of the evolution that got us to where we are, to streamline and really focus in on our reason for being.
Danielle?
The question is, start now or later?
Later.
I'm a clinician, so I collect stories. And stories are interesting to me, and they lead to either the clinical intervention or the population-based intervention that isn't being informed. So I got home and I literally went through the tunnels of every major hospital in New York with all of their material management folks screaming, "Lady, what are you doing? Lady, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be in the tunnels." But that was my needs assessment. I really wanted to see, what does the garbage look like that I'm after, and who's holding it, and what's the resistance. So I spoke to the guys who managed waste, and I did my own needs assessment there. And that informed the launch of AFIA when I saw the volume, and it's for regulation purposes. By virtue of regs, if any supply is in the room, in an OR with any patient in every surgery in the United States, anything that is unopened, untouched, unused has to be discarded because it was in the room breathing with a person. That's how extraordinary this is. So we're talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds, and I found some of that in these hallways. So that was the first. The second was, I did not have a full strategic plan until this year, and we are in the process of creating it. I created a very reactive organization because we learned as we went. So the best laid plans. I came from a Fortune 500 environment where everything was strategically laid out. We had our perfect columns, our Excel spreadsheets that tabled out everything. Here I was, running a completely different organization. The Haiti earthquake was practically the launch of us working with the Clinton Foundation and all of these huge organizations, because we could get supplies out of New York like no one else, and we continue to. So I'm kind of the I'm the outlier because I believed in it. And I did a needs assessment, and that's how I launched, based on what I found. And I ended up saying yes far more than I did no, and I think it saved us.
Well, so on the funding front then, because ideas are great and passion is great, but you do need funding, right? And wherewithal. So I'd love to start with you, because you're the nonprofit, right? Mm-hmm. What's the funding model like?
So, in the beginning, I invested my severance package in the launch of AFIA because I wanted this to succeed. So that was the first choice I made. The second was, I was very fortunate that the New York Times covered us within the first 3 months of operation. And so a funder came to me, this extraordinary man who I will love forever, and said, "I am blown away by what is going on here, and I'm going to get you a truck, and I'm going to underwrite your truck for the next 5 years." And this magic just started happening, with people showing up saying, "I'm going to help you with a warehouse, I'm going to help you with another truck," and it started. But that didn't mean that was how it was going to sustain. So I needed to find a way to ensure covering administrative costs of the operation. So we send 40-foot sea freight containers out of our warehouse. We pack jumbo jets. We pack duffel bags of people going away. Each item has a cost. And there is a price point for everything. And if there weren't, A, we couldn't run a business, and it is a business. And B, I think people abroad need to have an investment in what is coming their way, or it feeds corruption. So I am very confident in the model that we put in front of ourselves, and it helps AFIA run. So there are targets we have to hit. If we were a non-for-profit that was simply funded, and that was our only option to run, it would not work. We have to have like a product that facilitates the operation.
How large is the organization, human capital-wise?
14, and we're in a 17,000 square foot warehouse, which is not cheap in New York.
Where is it?
Yonkers.
Interesting. So you're in the real estate business too?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so similarly self-funded at the beginning. We did get seed funding from a couple of angel investors early on, but quickly what the model was is that we needed to generate revenue to keep the business afloat. So I think the biggest cost for us is to get our registered dietitians credentialed, and once we do that, we kind of have to foot the bill, but then we quickly line them up with patients so we can kind of recover that cost. So it's kind of a self-feeding machine at the moment. Certainly as we scale, we will need to go into more formal funding rounds, but at the moment it's been self-funded, friends and family, and then 2 small angel investments.
And Gabby, you mentioned that you had worked with some of the accelerators in New York, Blueprint, HitLab, etc. I'm not sure Blueprint is still running. I'm not, but
Yeah.
when it was, I know that their model was to take a percentage of the company. Was that something that
Yeah,
okay,
so we did.
Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
So that's interesting, right? So I think that whole kind of infrastructure has changed even in the past 5 years. So you'll see now more and more accelerators not taking equity and not providing funding either. Instead, what they're doing is they're providing mentorship and opportunities for companies to get help with their business plan, help with connections within the New York City ecosystem, whether they need a coder or a CTO or something like that. So that model is slowly moving to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why companies like Blueprint have shifted their focus. I think there was a time where everyone was so excited about digital health, they were just giving out money and taking equity, and then it's a long runway for health tech, like most of you in the room know. So when we joined the Blueprint class, we actually joined during that kind of shift. So we didn't have to provide equity, but at the same time we didn't receive any funding. We received mentorship, and the New York City EDC Collaborative, they actually have a new program where instead of providing funding or taking equity, they help you pilot. So they'll connect you to a hospital system that's looking for a nutrition brokerage company that can help connect patients to RDs, so that they'll kind of know where the pockets are and then help link you to that and help you design a pilot that could potentially turn into a white paper. So it's a bit more collaborative, I think, now compared to even 2 or 3 years ago, where it was about equity and funding.
For myself, as Pickett was started and trying to figure out, does this make sense and what is the plan with Pickett, I paid it out of my pocket. Basically, as I have 3 partners right now, as each partner came in, I would buy them flights to come over, we'd pay for the legal fees, whatever needed, that was on me. When we decided to raise funding, we were very fortunate because the idea was worked out, the team was motivated. So within the day of thinking about putting together a term sheet and writing that down on that first keystroke, we closed the funding within 5 days. So really,
that's incredibly unusual. Just FYI.
So we were expecting to have a subscription of multiple investors. The first investor that saw it took the full round, basically said, what do you need? And we were expecting, all sorts of, special rights if you go into raising either at the professional angel stage or the VC stage. They said, we believe in you, we believe what you're doing, the team's put together. So I think it's even now at this stage, and the way that pharmaceuticals are set up, especially generic products, we have a shorter window than a 10-year new chemical entity, like a new product. We maybe have a 2 to 3 year window on a generic side. So we really have a burn rate that goes until we start getting revenue on the first time around. So everything that we do is thinking about how do we conserve that cash, what are the products that are the quickest with the highest chance to get to the market, and then where's the greatest need. So when we start distributing those products, when they hit the market, we want to make sure that they're going out there and the price comes down to the point that we feel is natural. So it's a bit of, even when you do raise that funding, we're still acting like we're bootstrapping ourselves, and that's going to happen for a couple of years.
So for folks in the audience who may not have ever, been in front of angel investors or tried to raise money, can you describe, and had you raised money before?
I had twice, yeah.
Okay. So can you kind of describe the process that you think about when you're going out to think about who you're going to raise money from and what the story is? And
yeah, I think first off, it's anybody, right? I mean, you really have to be unabashed and being able to describe who you are to that type of person and get them to understand why it's important so they get excited about it. You have to be able to say, is this something you want to do? And even if that's on our partnership level, if that's, you're working, we work with formulation labs saying to the head of formulation, don't you want to do that for free from us? Because, you have to get used to that, and that's part of the fundraising piece. In terms of putting together that story and what that package is, it has to make sense. And I think, we talked about what's the market. I think one of the biggest questions that you have going into a business model is, can you quantify whatever that business model is, what that profit's going to be, and can you show it's grounded in numbers, and how to get those people to be in the company. once you have that story in place, it just naturally unfolds. I mean, you really should just be the steward of the idea once it makes sense on a rational basis. And I think it's very easy to say, oh, we're going to go out there and change the world and take it. But if you really have benchmarks and you say, you know, we can go to each hospital and find medical supplies, and I've seen those medical supplies, and this is the amount, that's really how someone that wants to put capital in the company will respond once you have something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Joshua. Like, you go to everyone. I mean, the angel investor that we connected with very early on was I met at an oil and gas industry conference. So it has nothing to do with healthcare, but they were interested in the idea because they also had a family member that needed nutrition counseling. So our story is, I think, translatable in that. You know, it's not like this high science story we're telling. We're saying you need nutrition in addition to your meds. And so a lot of people relate and can quickly understand. I think to kind of keep that vision going, though, to Joshua's point, you still have to show some numbers, right? So we show here are the average reimbursement, you know, based on certain codes. Here's, you know, the insurance companies that are most likely to pay. So we have like metrics, and luckily we have those metrics because we've done 2 very targeted pilots. So we did one pilot with Health First, and we focused in on a very specific patient population. So they had 2 socioeconomic target outreach programs. One was South Asians in the Brooklyn, Queens area that were at high risk for cardiovascular disease. The second was expectant and new moms in the Bronx. So like 2 very specific populations of patients, and we were able to do pilots with very defined outcome measures. And then being armed with those 2 white papers, we were able to speak with our investors with a lot more evidence-based results versus just kind of this conceptual idea. So that certainly has helped us. I mean, it's taken a lot of time to get that. I mean, I've been working on Zavvi Health for 4 years now, but I think that's helped us kind of get the traction that we have because we're taking those steps first before going for funding.
I think it's important to be really clear with what you're doing. I've sat with people pitching a concept, entrepreneurs, startups, non-for-profits, and it's so much that they're taking on. I mean, the last time I sat with someone, I said, I still don't understand what you do. And that's a problem if you want to pitch. You need to be really clear, and I think the best opportunities are if you're clear about what your slice of the pie is. Mm-hmm. So a perfect example is I've taken people with me to Haiti who are funders of our work, and they will say, how are you dealing with the lack of water, and how are you dealing with the lack of food and the lack of employment? Like, I'm looking at this. This is my contribution to the lands we serve. I see all of it, but I can't impact that. This is where I know I can have an impact. So I think that's important. The second is to be very clear who you're asking for support and that it matches what you have to offer. I have seen colleagues go to people who only support mental health and ask them for projects in microfinance, and it's where's the match here? I don't see the match, and I'm being flippant, and I don't mean to be, but I think a little bit of homework goes a long way. And finally, and I'm going to be flip again, we're not selling dresses, we're selling healthcare, and we're selling better lives for people that are misunderstood and rarely seen or listened to. And if you can tuck that away as you approach someone and ask for support, that's a far easier ask.
So you're all obviously great leaders, right? That just comes through from each of you. But in order to build a sustainable organization, you need staff, right? And you need other people who believe in it, and you probably need to pay them. Yeah. So in terms of recruiting and building teams, number one, I'd love to hear how large I know yours is 14, but how large your teams are and how you've gone about identifying people that you want to bring on and actually pay. Why don't we start with you, Gabby?
Yeah, I can start. So I have 3 full-time partners that work with me, and then we have the RD network is about 50 credentialed registered dietitians in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. So that's our team, but really the day-to-day is me and one other colleague. And to your point, you know, we don't get paid, right? We're working on this because we're looking for the long-term payoff. And you know, really what Kelly focuses in on is working. She's a registered dietitian as well, so she does all of the interface, kind of the customer relations, getting all the paperwork from the RDs. There'll be like certain vocabulary that I may not know because I don't have that same exact training. So she handles all of that, whereas I'm handling more of the working with the insurance companies, working with the doctors, getting new doctors signed on to be a client. Now we're expanding into working with a couple of hospitals in the New York area. So I'm doing more of that business development, front-facing work. So it's really, you know, just bootstrapping, and unfortunately I have a team member that's able to work on this without being paid, because she also understands the vision. But yeah, I mean, to the point I made earlier, as we scale, that's something that we'll have to consider moving forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, I want to work with the best, and I want to be intimidated with those people I work with. So in putting together the partnerships, I have 3 partners in the company. One was previously the director of the research pharmacy at Columbia Medical Center, is now the director of the research pharmacy at Rockefeller. He has brought many products to market, both new chemical entities and generics. He's our science guy. He's our chief science officer. We recently were at the Orphan Drug Conference. You know, we're talking to the FDA officers that are our friends that we've had conversations with for the last 20 years. You know, that's fantastic. Because we're a company, because we are a for-profit company, we want to make sure that as we grow in a way that is healthy in a for-profit way. So even thinking about how that growth is, the structure, the governance, which will be a very important piece later. The second partner is an investment banker, was a venture capitalist, but also did some public health. He's actually in the executive MHA program here. He was the CEO of a hospital. So we have someone that's sort of sizing up, you know, what does this look like from the finance end internally, so when we offer things externally that it makes sense on both avenues. And then the last, and actually just joined today as a partner, he was a CEO of a company called Novobiotics. He was recently, I think it was 2014, they were on the cover of Nature because they discovered an antibiotic that now is, I think it just had the IND filed recently. But he basically had a drug discovery platform for antibiotics. He's coming in because he sees the value of this and wants to be our business development officer. So between us, that's how we formed the core team. And each one of us has, at some point, has been a CEO of a company. So as we bring on vendors, as we do contract manufacturing, as we work with partners on the drug discovery front, we all have that managerial executive experience to grow the company out. So that's how we.
So is it 4 partners and is there any actual staff, or?
You know, the staffing that we do is really contract basis. You know, it's.
Well, that's important to understand that's what people often do.
You know,
staffing.
An interesting question we had, and sort of the model that we saw was, you know, should we have a lab? How much should be in house? Because we saw that, you know, really if you own the formulation lab, you can get economies of scale coming out of it. One of the advisors that we found actually was the CEO of a generics company where they ran everything virtual for all those years, and they had an exit of $600 million. So for the first 6 years, they were basically in someone's apartment running it with everything contracted out. So that was a confirmation for us that we could run this hybrid model and we could contract out, keep the executive, you know, administrative expense low, and just work with those partners and find ways to align with them, whether that's future revenue or reduce costs to keep us that small shop in.
How old is your company? When did you form Pickett?
It's 8 months old.
Okay, so it's relatively new. Gabby, yours is 4 years old. Danielle?
We're 10.
You're 10. So now you talk about staffing.
So the beginning, I had to figure out how to get a lot of help for no money. And so I literally started going to treatment programs. I had all these supplies. I had a semi-truck sitting outside of my house from a major hospital filled with supplies. The cops are banging on my door every night saying, when are you going to move the semi-truck? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a warehouse. This is happening faster than I could have ever anticipated. And this was what my children grew up with, was this activity for 3 weeks. And so I decided I would go to treatment programs because I'm an OT. So I went to Children's Village and I went to Jewish childcare and the cottage school and said, I think I have something really spectacular for these kids to get involved in. I want them to come to me and help me sort. And they're going to save people's lives and they're going to feel amazing doing it. And it saved me and it saved them. And extraordinary things happen there. I think in the non-for-profit world, unless people are perfect and can complete a 10-page application to volunteer, they're not welcomed. With us, you walk in the door and you're part of our community, and I think that's vital for people to have an opportunity to give back, and that saved me. The first year of Athia's life, I too had no salary, and I relied on these extraordinary volunteers and worked. And I think that when you launch, you have to be very creative around where the pockets of help and support can come from and how it can feed others as you're feeding your own concept. And for me, it was these extraordinary volunteers, and we've built that over time. We've thousands of people who fit that category now. Who remain involved with us.
Yeah. What about do you have full-time staff?
Yes, so we're a staff of 14. Over time, we raised enough capital as an organization. The model of X amount of shipments every month to sustain worked, and we started adding on. I have a COO, I have a CAO, I have a director of volunteers, we have a full warehouse crew, we have a truck driver to move. 1 million pounds of supplies in and out every year is a monstrous task with lots of different delineated roles.
So for you two, because you've been around the longest, so kind of looking back at the launch and the trajectory, thinking about that, what are some of the things, number one, that have surprised you the most about starting and running a business? And number two, what are a couple of things that you wish you had done differently? Do you want to start? Or you can start, Gabby.
Sure, I can start. There's a lot of things I wish I did differently.
Just a couple.
So I think the biggest thing I maybe didn't value or think about early on is I was trying to build everything. I was trying to build this video chat feature that the RDs could use when they see their patients, plus the post appointment notes on a very user-friendly modular template on our website. So I was trying to build all of this stuff, and even like simple things like eligibility checks, I was trying to do it myself, or paying a billing company. And what I slowly realized is there's so many subscription models, there's so many services that can do portions of your business for you. And looking back, I wish I researched that a little bit more to streamline what I was focused on. So for example, we work with a company now that does eligibility checks in like 30 seconds. So I just have to type in the stuff and I get the information right away. Whereas I used to like talk to the patient on the phone, okay, I'll call you before the end of the day, I'd call the insurance company. So there's a lot of learning there, and in terms of like using these subscription programs. We went to companies like American Well, we went to companies that had telehealth solutions and just started using their platform versus building one. So I think that was one of the biggest learnings for me is try not to build everything. Sometimes you just have to pay, and it'll make your life easier, and you can focus on growing the business. And then one other thing I really kind of underestimated was the importance of having a full-time, or at least a 50% time CTO. So a technologist that was on our company that could really help us with our websites, help us with troubleshooting. We initially worked with this company in Romania to build our website, and it was working fine, but whenever there was a glitch, there was no one to help, and that's really difficult when you're a customer-facing business. As soon as they have one or two negative experiences, they don't want to use you anymore. So I should have brought on a CTO earlier than I did.
I think for anyone wanting to start a non-for-profit, you must use your local politicians to advocate for you to get your 501c3 status, or you will end up at the bottom of someone's pile for the next 3 years while you're waiting, and you need that in order to raise capital. So that's number one. I was surprised by how traumatic it is to hear some of the stories of the underserved worldwide. And I've heard lots of stories in many different environments, and I had to figure out how to keep my staff and myself sane as you're watching people fall into boats in the Aegean Sea coming to Lesbos, to moments after the Haiti earthquake. It is, you collect these experiences and then you have to find a way to relegate and stabilize your team and yourself when you've been exposed to this. And I think building communities, the only way new concepts work is if you're not siloed. So I have people we rescue supplies from, and I figure out what they need, and I make sure they get what they need from us. If they say, I need weight reports from you every month, I do it. Whatever they're needing is what I'm hearing, because we exist because they are making this possible. We have we've synagogues and churches and Boy Scouts and schools coming to volunteer to help us sort. And then our partners abroad are extraordinary. And it is all about building community and not positioning oneself as, I'm just going to do this blindly, because it never works. So I think those are, and you have to take care of yourself. I did not take care of myself at the beginning. I, like you, thought I had to do everything and not ask for help. I ended up with pneumonia. I could barely breathe, and I was like, I got it. Okay, I need to get better at asking for help, at delegating, at figuring out who in this community could become more involved, or else you just wear yourself so thin you're good to no one.
Josh, you're a serial entrepreneur, really. So what are some of the big lessons you've learned from running these companies?
Yeah, with Pickett, that we're a new entity. We've been talking about it for 2 years, but really in terms of executing on the company and making it grow, it's been 8 months. One thing I've been very surprised with, traveling and going to the major conferences, meeting with different vendors, is when you have the right idea and you're asking something that's reasonable, the biggest players will talk to you. I mean, managing directors from some of the largest companies are responding to us, taking calls, following up. That's been very surprising this last 8 months, that when you have a good idea and a scientific plan to back it up, they're willing to say, hey, even before funded or post funding or what that is. So that's something I've been surprised in. And I would say, it's important to ask at the right time and not take too much of time, because we're all so busy today, and especially if you need something from someone, if you feel that there's resistance, you can be polite and follow up again. And I think that's a big piece. From previous companies, one thing that was a mistake that I saw early, both between the partners before and I hope that we're not occurring now, is you have to be willing to reset often. One thing that I'm hearing from Danielle is you're going to have problems and opportunities that you have to think outside of the box, and if you're the founder, if you're the CEO, it's up to you to solve those problems. You have to be able to go in there if whoever is sick and convince the person to open up the gate to let the truck out or whatever it is. There's just going to be these setbacks that are guaranteed to come, whatever model you have. You have to be able to know how to solve those and be confident that even though you can't predict them, you'll be there, persistent to make them come through. I think that's.
Before we go to questions, one last. How important are having advisors, right? Like an advisory board or a board of director? Well, basically just advisors. How important has that been?
I mean, I think it's huge. I don't necessarily believe in the model of, okay, you need 5 advisors, 2 from the private sector, just that whole structure. I think it's more important to work with someone that's done what you're doing before, and also someone that understands the value of your work. I mean, it's been incredible for us to have advisors, but we haven't formalized like an advisory board or talked about equity with our advisors. We're really just working with mentors and people in the field that want to see us succeed. And the underlying kind of I think relationship is that when we get to that point where we're raising, going through a formal round of raising funding, that's when we would formalize and create that. But at this early stage, we've kept it informal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer it 2 ways. We have a formal scientific advisory board that's been in the business. We're looking for people that have had successful, that have the networks. But in that advisory capacity, and pretty much everyone that you're interacting with, you want to understand what motivates them, what brings them to the table. You know, what are they excited about? Because you don't want to ask things of people that they don't want to do. So on the advisory board, you know, we want to find people that maybe missed oncology products, and that's something we're going after and saying, you want to help us get to there through the connections that you have, and really align and do that matchmaking. You know, and the other sort of the way to flip the question around is everyone is going to be your advisor. As you walk around as the CEO of that founder of the company, you need to be listening to everybody. You know, you can't walk with your chin up. You know, if you have to sweep the floor, you're going to sweep the floor. And that person that did sweep the floor in the lab, maybe they have some insight of, you know, what's going on. So you should constantly be asking for help, asking what their opinions are, and taking the time to really listen. It's very easy to get a big head about it, to say, oh, you know, look how great we are. But, you know, to really grow the PC sort of every day, you have to say, you know, what am I going to learn today from the people around me?
We have a board of directors, and we have an amazing board at this point, but we also have an advisory council. And I tend to sort of cherry pick the content experts in that advisory council. So we needed help with our warehouse. And we have now a retired extraordinary expert on running warehouses coming in and working with us. So I know what we need. So I go out and find these people. And the other piece that we haven't talked about, I talk about my work to the point where I'm falling asleep at night. So if I'm sitting at a bar waiting for a friend to meet me, if I'm in an elevator, it doesn't matter. I'm talking about AFIA, and I have found some of my best advisors from just that kind of interaction. So for anyone in this room that's what's in front of you, start practicing that speech everywhere you go.
Great. So I think the way we want to do questions is coming up to the mic, right? So let's start. Can you go to the mic?
But I can also talk loud because I'm an emergency room doctor like Daniela.
Yes, you can.
So I guess the question I'm having as I'm starting my own business is the difference between a venture capitalist, an angel investor, and now this accelerator. So can you expand for the group, what are the differences, if there are any?
Yes, I think it depends who you're talking to, and I think you have a blend. If you go to an angel network, they're going to put a term sheet in front of you. You're going to sit between a review committee. Venture capital might just be a bigger number on that. They might have a more of an interest to have governance in the company. In terms of raising money, I think the way that I would go about it is you want to find a connection with the person. Like if you're going through an institutional checklist of what has to come in, there's something missing with that. You want to find someone that really has that fit, that they have something that they're solving within themselves by investing in the company. And once that interest is aligned, whether that's expertise or a sense of what you're doing, then everything sort of lines up. But you know, in terms of VC and angels, you're just an angel's putting in their own capital, right? A VC is expecting a return coming out. They probably are in some segment where they're taking bets on certain, you know, pieces. You know, maybe it's buzzwords or whatever they're going after. I would just be, I think I would. If you group together professional angels and VCs and angels themselves, I think the difference is you're going to have someone that believes in you versus someone that really institutionally needs to show returns, and the financial mechanisms that they'll ask for in that round of funding. If they don't like you, all of a sudden can be triggered, and life can be very hard. So I think that's what I would separate out.
Yeah, and I can expand on accelerators. So basically, the accelerator model is that they provide you a working space, a community of other startup founders that you would work with day to day that might be going through some of the same challenges or struggles that you are, so you can kind of socialize your problems and find solutions. And then they also provide opportunities for networking, so they'll call in VCs or angel investors to be in for an evening to do, you know, the startups will do a demo day so they can showcase their company. So it's really kind of a boot camp, if you will, for companies that are looking to get a kickstart, and they usually last somewhere between, I would say, like a couple months to maybe a little under a year. So we, you know, the ones right now that are very active, at least in New York City, are J Labs, which is part of Johnson & Johnson. Then there's the New York City Collaborative that I talked about. There's a couple others, like in New Jersey, like Tiger Labs. I can give you a list. I've probably talked to all of them.
The other thing is Columbia itself has a lot of really great entrepreneurial resources. I mean, the whole entrepreneurship consortium, tons and tons of boot camps and advisors. And so for those of you who are part of the Columbia community as either here or as alums, you should definitely take advantage of that. Sure.
I wasn't sure if we're doing introductions. I definitely can't project. So from what I heard, that sounds like, once you identify a need, you kind of start to do the research for it. At what point do you, and it sounds like some of you really invested your full time to that. So at what point, if you do have a 9-to-5 job, do you actually transition and make this like your full-time investment? And at what point do you think you should maybe continue to keep your full-time job as you start to build, as you create these connections, as you try to get your 501c and all of that? So where's the cutoff? Are there key metrics that we should be looking for to sort of indicate where that is?
That is such a great question and an honest one. I continued as a consultant in elder care programming so that I would have a bridge. So I found a way to launch AFIA, and for the first year consulted, and I taught at Columbia, and that was how I helped to make ends meet. 1. 2 is the minute you really start this process, you see it happening. So you're not waiting on tables, waiting to become an actress. You start the minute you start, and that's where you are. And the rest is just the means to the end temporarily, but you see it. I mean, you wake up seeing the work you are about to enter as it becomes part of your life. And so the 9-to-5 and then launching on top of that, you don't own any of it. It's whimsy. It's kind of like out there somewhere. So it has to become an entirely present part of your life and your psyche.
I'll tell you for myself, we talked about 8 months, and it really was a 16-month process going up to it. And what happened that 8 months before the company was started was I had a full-time job. I was in the program here. I consulted on the side to pay those partners coming in and set up those legal fees. Then I did the business. I mean, that was a tough 8 months leading up to it, but that's what I had to do to get the window where I felt, let's take a shot where I can give it some time. And it was offered promotions in the process and things, but you give up friends, you give up time with your family, you give up your personal relationships, because really the impact that I saw, and there's no person behind you that's going to make that happen. So you have to have that commitment, and definitely it wasn't an easy time, but I'm so happy I did it, and it still is going to be always a great time. What's that trigger point? It's going to be hard to pick, but you have to have that commitment in yourself saying, this is what I want to do, and that 9-to-5 is secondary, even though I still give it my all, and I'm a good professional, but all of that is to support me transitioning, and what can I do to get there as quick as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I have a 9-to-5, so I work full-time. I work on Savvy Health all the other hours that I can, weekends. So I think part of your question is, when do you make the jump? So, I mean, that's a great question. So for me, my horizon looks like this. So we are establishing the business, we're establishing relationships, we're starting to see profit. When we enter the fundraising stage, that's when I would quit.
Thank you. Can you go? Thanks.
First of all, I'm glad you're all on our side. Watching you three up here reminds me of my wife Myra and myself formed a business in 1980 and we were acquired by a multi-international French organization in 1990, June. And if it wasn't for Columbia, I would not be here at this meeting. I went to a Columbia alumni meeting. I worked for a big pharma company called Shearing, and I was gassing off to a lawyer and a businessman from the business school, and that they treat me well, but I want to be in business for myself. Come up with an idea. And the idea mirrors what you all three talk about in your particular endeavors. And the idea wove itself into the fabric of my head, where I thought about it 24/7, where I became obnoxious.
That's impossible.
With 5 kids and 9 grandchildren now, it's not, but it's an American story and it's a Columbia story. And I just want to tell you, it all started one day. I visited a nursing home, Kingsbridge Heights Nursing Home on the Bronx on the Major Deacon Expressway. I can say I was fortunate that I witnessed a patient, an 84-year-old woman named Mary Monaco, who had a stage 3 decupid ulcer, a bed sore. And standard therapy was not helping. And on her little dresser in the room that she shared were pictures. This is what I looked like when I was young. This is my family. My hair is dry, dull, frizzy, split end. I can't go to the beauty parlor in the basement. I can't have my nails done. My bed sore has pain.
Excuse me, what's your name?
What?
What's your name?
My name is Arnold Gans, G-A-N-S. I'm on the board of...
Arnold, this is I know you've got an amazing story, but because we have only a couple of minutes left, is there a specific question? Because
there's not a question. Okay. It's just an analysis that I believe in quality of life endeavors. If you can improve the quality of life of people that you serve, it's a public health tonic.
It is. And we'd love to hear the business that you started. It sounds amazing, but I just want to make sure we have time.
Which one? This one? Oh, okay. Hi. My question is about market research. I'm in infancy in my idea, and I'm trying to figure out just how much I need to know. Gabby, you mentioned having a pilot, but how much do you need to show, like even angel investors, sort of, how do you know that people are going to use your product? So I don't know if your pilot outcome was clinical outcome versus are they going to use your service?
So we had 3 outcomes. The first was patient engagement, which is what health systems and physicians want to see. The second one was a bit more clinical around, whether weight was one of them. And then the third outcome was around just like more of the logistical flow of the operations. So we kind of structured our outcomes in that way. But if you're talking about early market research, the way we did it is we freelanced it. So I wanted to know what the average cost of reimbursement was for an RD consult. I worked with an analyst off of Upwork, and they did that work for me. So I freelanced a lot of the market research out because it's too expensive to go and work with like a Decisions Resources or something and try and do like a marketscaping. And I had a background in consulting, so I kind of knew what numbers to look for to build that landscape. But I freelanced most of it out.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for Josh and then a question maybe for the panel. So the question for Josh is, how do you think about what you are going to price your products at? So you mentioned that basically the idea is to create access, and there's an implicit lowering of the price. So how do you think about that? And then the question for the panel is, how do you think about competition? And how do you create a moat for your business to defend your idea while it's still very small and you're building it, right? Or do you think about that? So that's sort of the broad one. So.
Yeah, so in terms of price, we're working within a economy that has capitalistic principles. So just by entering the market, you're going to see a X percentage double-digit drop in that price. That's what we're following. If there's two manufacturers and we're the third, we expect to see a certain amount go down. As we get economy of scale, we're going to give that more. I think part of what we can do, because it's when you start generating cash, so we have a long window when we're burning money to do the R&D. When you enter that, the price is going to come down. But then once you have products that are durable and stable, you can start donating those to those that really do need it. So I think that that's the balance of it. But really, we took a lot of time to see out of how many, given how much competition is, how much that product will drop, and then over time as new products enter, what's the lifetime of that product. So it's just a natural process where it gets to pretty close to break even in generics.
And now the moat. So that's the third time I've heard the moat now in the past week. So that must be is that
trendy term?
It's a trendy thing, building a moat around. But I've heard it from top CEOs. So what's your moat?
Yeah. So I would say our moat is that we accept insurance. I mean, it's surprising that most people in this room probably have coverage for about 6 nutrition consults per year. But most people don't know that. And what we found is, there's several telehealth companies out there that are offering nutrition consultations, Teladoc being one of them. So we're not going to compete with Teladoc, but they don't take insurance. There are companies like Mailman, Rise, that we've looked at that are potentially competitors. But again, they don't take insurance. So we really looked at the competitive landscape over the course of several years and realized that that's our one kind of key feature. And then we also looked at nutrition companies that work directly with employers. And that's a different model as well. So the ability to work directly with the patient and build their insurance is our moat, and that's what we've focused in on. Like I mentioned earlier, we went away with all the other noise of the platform, the telehealth feature, all of that.
Ours is that I think we have an extraordinarily loyal community of folks who work with us in all 3 of our areas of competency. And because of that, and it's personal, it's actually very personal. So I have strong relationships with the major health centers of New York, and there could be competition every minute. She could be a physician from Ghana who wants to take the entire ER to her hometown in Ghana versus me as an outsider. But I think because we have really good systems set up that support the hospitals, that support the community for volunteering and support abroad, people are really loyal to us. And we invested a lot in just that process of loyalty.
Our mode is that the FDA demands that pharmaceutical products are at the highest standard. So within these complex generic products, they're so difficult that out of all the brilliant people out of there, despite that it's a competitive environment, there's no competition. So when we bring those products to market, there's a guarantee that that's equivalent to something else, and the time that it takes to show that is our moat. In some ways, it's not having exclusivity necessarily on a patent, and that's something we plan to do later, but that's 5 to 7 years out. But that assurance that what you're taking is what you're taking, that's the moat that we have.
So we're going to close, but one last question. What do you love about being an entrepreneur?
It's easy for me. I love solving impossible problems. I like waking up and having brilliant people next to me, and the things that they don't know how to do, they come to me and we work together to solve it. To sit there and do the same thing every day, it's just a very difficult piece. I want to go out, I want to meet people, I want to do something that helps, I want to put people together, I want to find, when I meet people, you want to ask who they are and what they've done, and then you want to take that passion they have, that itch that they have, and put it to work. And that sort of organization of the world, I feel good when you see that response in someone's place when you help them find that purpose of the things that they like to do. You don't want to force people to do things, but anyways, that's just in terms of that sort of connection of the things that people want to do where there's outcomes. That's what I enjoy.
Yeah, I heard this very inspiring quote that basically said, innovation is the child of irritation. So anything that irritates you to the point where you want to come up with a solution is, I think, a great way to tackle a business problem, right? So the fact that there's no, nutrition offered for a patient with like GI issue totally irritated me, and it made me come to a point where I wanted to innovate on that. So what I like about being an entrepreneur is being able to take that kind of frustration and that kind of negative energy and turn it into something positive, which is solution oriented and helps many people, and to your point, has a public health impact, which I think really is kind of the thread of, I think everyone in the room, we're interested in public health and creating a broader impact.
I am completely nourished by leading with humanity and compassion. And so I have a staff who say to me, I'm not scared to fail, because my biggest concern is when people blame everyone else and everything else, and then I lose my mind completely. But if I have an environment where I can create it, and people are safe to fail and then problem solve as a group, I could enter that body of work every single day. And there's something about riding the fire truck. So I understand your point about the really big problems and challenges. And I feel like I am literally riding a fire truck every day, and we have no idea where we're going to go or what we're going to be presented with. But the one thing I know is that we can figure it out. And that is so extraordinary to me as a life.
Well, you've all nourished me and nourished the audience, and so thank you all for a really interesting discussion tonight.
Thank you.
So are we going to stay around?
Definitely we're going to stay around, so just say quick words. So just want to say thank all my panelists. Amazing. It is being recorded, so the opportunity for others to hear their wisdom hopefully will project outward. I do hope that you all stay. We have the room for a while, so that way you can mingle with one another, eat a little bit of nibbles, some drinks. Hopefully the panelists will stay around and answer maybe one or two questions from you if you don't rush them all completely. But again, thank you all for coming, and please do stay. Thank you.